Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a topic you've asked about, dive into the research, and pull out the really key insights for you.
Yep.
And today, we're tackling a real paleontological puzzle, a listener request about the dinosaur Aristosaurus.
That's right. We've got Van Hopen's original description from 1920, and then, well, basically a century of debate about what this thing actually was.
So our mission today.
Figure out what Aristosaurus was supposed to be, why it got scientists talking, and, why its place on the dinosaur family tree is still kind of up in the air.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's dig in. The story starts way back in South Africa, Free State Province, near a place called Rosendal.
And it wasn't paleontologists out there looking. It was quarry workers. They were just getting building stone, I think, from the Clarence Formation. Early Jurassic stuff.
And they crack open some rock and boom, dinosaur skeleton.
Yeah, pretty much. A nearly complete one, apparently split right across two slabs of rock. Can you imagine?
Wow, no kidding.
And what's cool is how word got out. Someone took photos, and these pictures eventually reached E.C.N. Van Hopen. He was a paleontologist.
Right, at the museum in Pretoria, the Ditsong National Museum of Natural History, as it's called now.
Exactly. He saw the photos, realized it was important, and the museum actually bought the specimen in 1915. Van Hopen thought it was a real gem for their collection.
That's a great story. Accidental discoveries are always fascinating.
They really are. So much of paleontology relies on chance finds like that.
And this fossil, specimen TM130, you can still see it today, right? Though it's very flattened.
Yeah, extremely flattened, like you said earlier, almost like a pressed flower from the Jurassic, preserved on these two big slabs.
Now, the skull's mostly gone, which is a shame. Just bits of jaw, maybe some teeth left.
Right. But you do get a good chunk of the backbone, about 14 vertebrae from the back, maybe a dozen from the tail.
And the hind legs are apparently in decent shape, even the feet.
Surprisingly good shape, yeah. Which was crucial for Van Hopen.
Okay, so Van Hopen gets this specimen, studies it, and in 1920, he publishes his description.
He does, and he gives it the name Aristosaurus erectus.
Aristosaurus, that sounds grand.
It does, doesn't it? Aristos is Greek for best, and sauros means lizard. So, best lizard.
Best lizard.
Oh.
Okay, and erectus, maybe hinting at how it stood.
Seems likely, yeah. He described it as a small dinosaur. The femur, the thigh bone, was only about, 13.7 centimeters long?
Tiny. So he compared it to other dinosaurs found nearby.
Oh, definitely. He had to. Especially Massospondylus carinatus, which comes from the same rocks.
And he saw differences.
He did. He noted Aristosaurus was smaller, for one. He also thought its back vertebrae looked proportionally longer than in Massospondylus.
Okay.
And then there were details in the pelvis, like the ischia, those two bones down there. He thought they weren't fused together at the bottom in Aristosaurus, unlike what he saw in Massospondylus.
Specific details.
Very specific. He even compared it to another species, Massospondylus herrezi, based on how long certain foot bones, the metatarsals, were relative to each other. Real detailed work.
Right, trying to pinpoint what made this best lizard unique.
And this led him to a pretty interesting conclusion. He thought Aristosaurus was, and I quote, much more highly specialized than other early sauropodomorphs around at the time, like Thiccodontosaurus or Ankylosaurus.
More specialized. How so?
Well, based on the pelvis shape, he actually suggested it was mainly bipedal, walked on two legs.
Ah, okay, so he's thinking it's maybe more like the Plesiosaurids in terms of how it moved.
Sort of, yeah, in terms of posture. He also pointed to the low position of the fourth trochanter on the femur.
Okay, remind us what the fourth trochanter is.
It's a bump, a projection on the thigh bone where big leg muscles attach. Its position tells you something about how those muscles worked, how the animal moved. For Van Hopen, its low position supported the idea of walking primarily on the hind legs.
Got it. Any other clues?
He also noted the humerus, the upper arm bone, seemed kind of small proportionally compared to other things he classified as ankylosaurids, except for one called Ankylosaurus solus.
Okay, so putting all this together, small size, longer vertebrae, pelvic details, muscle attachment points, small arms. Van Hopen decides it's an Ankysaurid.
Yes, he placed it in the family Ankylosauridae. He specifically ruled out Plesiosauridae.
Why rule them out? I thought he saw similarities in posture.
Mainly because plesiosaurs were generally much larger dinosaurs, and he also thought plesiosaurs had 15 back vertebrae, whereas he counted only 14, or thought Aristosaurus likely only had 14.
Right. So we have Van Hopen's take, Aristosaurus erectus, the best lizard, a small, specialized bipedal ankysaurid from the early Jurassic of South Africa. Case closed.
Huh. Not even close. This is where the story gets really messy, actually. The debate begins.
Oh, what happened next?
Well, fast forward to 1932. Another big name in paleontology back then, F. von Guane, takes a look. And he basically says, nope, Aristosaurus erectus is just Jeeposaurus capensis.
Wow, wait. So not a unique best lizard at all. Just another specimen of a different dinosaur that was already known.
That was his argument, yeah. Synonymized it, basically. Just considered it the same thing.
And did people buy that?
For a long time, yeah. That view that Aristosaurus was just Gypasaurs kind of became the standard thinking for decades.
Up until?
Until 1976. Peter Galton and Michael Clover revisited the fossil. And they argued, hold on, maybe Van Hopen was onto something. They thought Aristosaurus was a valid, distinct species.
Okay, so back to being unique again.
Kind of. But they actually suggested it belonged in the Paleosauridae, the very group Van Hopen had kicked it out of.
Oh, the plot thickens. So potentially related to the bigger guys after all.
That was their thinking. But crucially, they also said the fossil needed more work, more preparation, better illustrations to really nail down its features and relationships. Clean it up more, study it in more detail.
Which highlights how important just physically working on the fossils is.
Absolutely. New techniques or just more time spent carefully cleaning can reveal things missed before.
So the pendulum swings back towards Aristosaurus being its own thing, maybe a plesiosaur relative, but I sense there's another twist.
There is indeed. Just 5 years later, 1981, Michael Cooper weighs in, and he offers a completely different idea.
Okay, what now?
Cooper suggested that maybe Aristosaurus wasn't a distinct species or a synonym of Gypasaurus. He thought it was probably just a juvenile Massospondylus.
A juvenile, a baby Massospondylus.
Essentially, yeah. His argument was that those features, Van Hopen noted the smaller size, the pelvic differences, the things that made it seem like an ankysaurid, might just be signs of immaturity, features that would change as the animal grew up.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Young animals often look quite different from the adults.
It's a huge challenge in paleontology, yeah. Trying to figure out if differences are because it's a different species or just because it's young or old or male or female.
So where does all this back and forth leave Aristosaurus today? What do scientists think now?
Well, after all that debate, the most recent consensus is actually less certain than any of those options. It's currently listed as a nomen dubium.
Nomen dubium. Okay, I think I know what nomen means. Name. What about dubium?
Dubious. Uncertain.
A dubious name, so we just don't know.
Pretty much. It means that based on the available evidence that one single, very flattened skeleton, we can't confidently assign it to a specific group or say for sure if it's distinct or not.
Why so uncertain? Is it just the juvenile possibility?
That's a big part of it. If it is a juvenile, comparing it to adult specimens of Massospondylus or other dinosaurs is really tricky. Things change a lot during growth.
And the flattening doesn't help, I imagine.
Exactly. It's so squashed that getting a true sense of the three-dimensional shape of the bones, which is crucial for comparison, is incredibly difficult. You lose a lot of anatomical detail.
So, okay, let's recap. We have this fossil found by accident in South Africa. Van Hopen calls it Aristosaurus erectus, the best lizard, thinks it's a small, unique, bipedal ankysaurid. Then von Huene says no, it's just Gypasaurus. Then Galton and Clover say no, it is unique, maybe a plesiosaurid, but needs more work.
Yep.
Then Cooper suggests maybe it's just a young Massospondylus.
You got it.
And now the current status is nomen dubium, a dubious name, an indeterminate sauropodomorph. That's the big group these early long-necked herbivores belong to, right? The ancestors of giants like Brontosaurus.
That's the group, yes. So we can say it's likely some kind of early sauropodomorph, but beyond that, it's just too uncertain based on what we have.
Wow, what a journey for one fossil.
It really illustrates how science, especially paleontology, works, doesn't it? It's not always about finding neat answers. Sometimes it's about recognizing the limits of the evidence. New finds, new ways of looking at old fossils, they constantly make us rethink things.
That dubious status isn't an endpoint necessarily, just an honest assessment of what we know now?
Precisely. It acknowledges the problems with the specimen and means if someone finds, say, another similar small sauropodomorph nearby, they'd need really strong evidence to confidently call it Aristosaurus.
So it leaves us with a question then. What could actually solve the mystery of Aristosaurus? Could we find more fossils?
That would be ideal, of course. More specimens, especially ones that aren't so flattened or maybe represent different growth stages.
Or could we maybe learn more from the original specimen, even though it's flattened? You mentioned Galton and Clover thought it needed more preparation back in '76.
That's the other possibility, maybe with modern techniques, CT scanning, or incredibly careful further preparation. Perhaps some subtle anatomical details could be revealed that were missed before, something that could finally link it definitively to Massospondylus, or maybe even confirm it was something unique after all.
So a fossil known for over 100 years might still have secrets to tell.
Absolutely. It's a great reminder that the book on these ancient creatures is never truly closed. There's always more to discover, more to understand,